Good afternoon, everybody. The International Parking Mobility Institute is pleased to present today's Shop Talks. Lesson learned, looking ahead, our industry's response to COVID-19. My name is Justin, and I'll be assisting Casey Jones, CAPP, in moderating today's Shop Talk. As a reminder, today's Shop Talk is being recorded, and we will make the recording available online and post it to IPMI's YouTube channel within a few days. Before I turn it over to Casey, I would like to introduce Dave Honorato, IPMI's chair, to say a few words. Dave?
Thanks, Justin. I would like to welcome everyone today to our last Shop Talk of the year, giving 2020 to boot. I anticipate that this is the last time we look in the rearview mirror, and instead we'll concentrate on the future. Hopefully, 2021 will be a year filled with recovery and successes. I know Casey will give us directions and options on moving forward. And remember, you are not in this pandemic alone, as IPMI and your fellow peers are here to fall back on to use as valuable resources. Let's stay connected. Before I introduce our moderator, I hope everyone enjoys the holiday with friends and family and have a Merry Christmas and a safe and Happy New Year. Now it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Casey Jones. Casey, the Zoom's all yours. Let's give 2020 the boot.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. I, like all of you, we are ready to look forward. We are tired of 2020, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get going, some really important business to take care of. First, please turn your camera on. We are going to have a group shot, and if this isn't exactly as you would expect in 2020, then I don't know what is. So we'd love for you to turn your cameras on. IPMI is about community. It's about us all coming together. So if you would please indulge us, Justin is going to get us all assembled and in the right order, tall people in the back, and we're going to take a group photo. So Justin, how about you help us do that?
Be happy to, Casey. All right. 1, 2, 3. Smile, everybody. Oh, perfect.
I think Sean had his eyes closed.
Sean.
I'm kidding. Hey, listen, folks. I want to start in kind of a different way today. I want us, if you can stand, indulge me, please. Take a moment and stand, even if it blows up your camera, even if you've got the business on the top and the party on the bottom. Take a minute to stand up, because I'm going to ask you to take a bow. Take a bow, people. Thank you for indulging me. I want to congratulate all of you, because we almost made it all the way through an unbelievable year. And that's not a small task or a small order by any stretch, but congratulations to you all. Congratulations to the amazing team of leaders on the board of IPMI and the staff for keeping this going. Folks, I said, that maybe you know this, but I've been a part of IPMI for a long time, and this family, this community is exactly what we needed to bring us through this crazy time. So congratulations to all of you. I mean that sincerely. So this is going to be a shop talk, and of course, like everything in 2020, nothing is normal. So this isn't going to be normal either. I have called upon, a group of my close friends and people that I really respect in the industry to help us through some segments of this conversation. Typically, in our face-to-face shop talks, it would be a very fluid thing, and we might have some ideas in mind about what we want to talk about. But then the conversation would morph and it would evolve and it would be very organic, and calling on people and letting that change the course of the shop talk. And we're going to try to do that today as best we can but in in the Zoom format, we needed a little bit more structure. So I'm really excited about the handful of people who have stepped up, and they have something to share, ready on some what I hope are interesting topics. Of course, Justin's going to help me out with questions as they come in the chat. Please feel free as we walk through each of the segments. You want to share something, you have a question, we'll do our level best to get to them. But to start things off, we've got a couple questions. This is sort of the appetizer for our shop talk today. And Justin's gonna help us launch a couple questions. So be ready to weigh in on change and on your experience through these poll questions in the pandemic in 2020. So if Justin can help us get that poll started.
Apologize, Casey. The poll is not being responsive.
Okay.
Give me 1 second here.
That's all good. Isn't this, this is how it is, folks. We have to adapt, overcome, and improvise, right? We may not get to these questions, but that's okay. That's quite all right. How about we trudge ahead?
That sounds great.
Okay, super. All right, so I will ask the questions, just not in a poll format, but just to give people a sense of what we want to try to accomplish in our shop talk today. So first question was going to be, how much change has your organization experienced since COVID-19? So not much. You're really waiting to see what happens. Oh, here we go. Fantastic. Look at that. So question number one, how much change has your organization experienced since COVID-19? Not much. We're really in a wait and see mode. Second option is small changes have taken place, but nothing significant. And the third option is significant changes have taken place. So if you don't mind weighing in, what's that look like for you? What's your experience been like? Justin, help me out here. So everyone can see all of these, all of the questions right now. Will we present all three of these at the same time?
Correct. You'll need to scroll down the screen you'll see the first one, then you'll see the second, and then the third. So scroll down and we'll just give you a moment or two to respond to it.
Super, thank you. You can tell I'm a pro at polling on, on Zoom calls. Second question, which of the following statements best describe your situation? Most of the changes we've made will be permanent. About the same number of changes will be permanent as will be temporary. And the final option there is most of the changes we've made will be temporary. And then the third question, looking forward to about a year out, which statement is most true for your organization? We've made most of the changes we're going to make already. So that's a steady state. We have some specific changes still to come. That's moderate. We're living in a dynamic world. Things are going to evolve rapidly and significantly over the next year. And so you would be in a dynamic change state. So we will give this another few seconds. See, we're still getting a couple of responses. So good on you, everybody. I think we're going to have some interesting responses here. All right, let's say 10 more seconds. Good enough. How about let's share those results? Are we sharing those results now? Okay, yeah. Got thumbs up. Good enough. Thank you. This is a participation sport, so I appreciate you all being a part of this. Okay, so first question, how much change has your organization experienced? Not surprising, significant changes have taken place. External, external, with our customers, with our budgets, all of that, that isn't surprising. Which of the following statements best describe your situation? About the same number of changes will be permanent as will be temporary. That's incredible, and that's great. I think that really sets up our conversation today really well to talk about what you learned making changes in 2020 that will help you in the future. And then the third one, again, not surprising, over 50% of respondents said we are living in a dynamic world. Things are going to evolve rapidly and significantly over the next year. So maybe the new norm is dynamic change and evolution, or at least for the next handful of years as we get back to whatever normal there might be. Super. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate everyone that weighed in. So I admit, maybe I admitted this to some of you before, but I am tired of talking about COVID-19 and our responses, and I know you are too. But really, the structure of this presentation, really what we wanted to try to achieve is to say, you know what, there was that period of paralysis, right? And I remember it, pretty vividly when things were shutting down and we weren't really doing anything. We were like, well, how long is this going to last, or what should I do? And then, sort of business closures and mandates happened in some places in the country. It was a strange time. And it created a little bit of paralysis. But not too long after that, things started to move ahead again. Things started to advance. And all of you, in some way, shape, or form, started to make things happen. But I think of, the decisions that you were thinking about before COVID-19, some of the dreams or aspirations that you had, or you were looking at another program somewhere else and you said, we'd really love to do that, but we've never really been able to get to yes. Well, lo and behold, this crisis happens, and maybe that creates the environment for us to get to yes. And then your responses on that poll about some of those changes being permanent is super encouraging. So the idea behind our shop talk today, yes, is to kick 2020 to the curb. But what did we learn when we got to yes in some of those changes? And how can we incorporate that into our strategy for the future? So that's really what we want to focus on today. And admittedly, that's going to take a little bit of going back, sort of regurgitating what the context is for that change. But I want to focus our attention on what caused us to be able to go ahead, what helped our decision makers or leaders that we report to, or even us, if we're those leaders, how did we move past the barriers or concerns, trepidation that we might have had before to get to yes, right? And again, how do we incorporate what we've learned now into our strategy for whatever change is going to be in the future? So that's how we want to tackle our time today. So when I reached out to a handful of folks in the industry and those thought leaders and progressive folks, I said, tell me something that you experienced, some change. What's the topic? Give me a little bit of context. And so it broke out into these segments. So I want you to be thinking about these sort of topic areas as we move forward. We're going to talk a little bit about technology investments. We want to talk about how teams work together. We want to talk about connecting with customers. There are some parking policy changes that were made we'll touch on, and then also mobility improvements that were advanced as well. So those are the topics that arose. We may be able to take more topics, and again, this may morph into other directions. So we'll see how our time together goes. So let's start with, these might be the easy ones, but let's start with technology investments. And I want to call on my good friend and my twin brother, Gary Means, from Lexington and Fayette County Parking Authority, otherwise known as Lex Park. Gary, if you're on the call, we'd love to hear about your parks equipment upgrades that you were able to advance. And I got to imagine, in a time when budgets are especially tight, I'm really interested to hear how you were able to move ahead with that. What is the context of that, and what you learned that can help us all move forward? So, Gary Means, I'm hoping you're on the call and can weigh in on your parks upgrades.
I am, Casey, and it should be easy to tell us apart since you've got the round glasses now and I've got the square ones. So that ought to work pretty well. Hey, everybody. I'm honored to even be asked to have a discussion or to be thought of as a thought leader. I work for a parking authority, so our board doesn't try to think governmentally. We try to make good business decisions and decisions that will affect both accountability and customer service, safety. All of those things are always also bottom line. So going into COVID, we were coming up on a close to end of life for our parks system. We have 4 garages in our inventory, and about a year before this, we had changed one of them from a gated to gateless. So that's a whole other conversation that I've had with some of you. But the next 3 garages still had the gated park system. It was time for an upgrade. You know, and maybe just prior to COVID, and somebody can correct me that's familiar with all the park system, but I believe I started seeing some of that adding on to the idea of frictionless parking, the wave to park technology. I think that there were several groups that were already starting to talk about that prior to COVID, but certainly as soon as COVID came out, that started to be something I was seeing all the parks companies that could do it were throwing that out. But if you think beyond even the idea of a wave to park, so you don't have to touch the button to get a citation, I mean a ticket, the other things that were coming along, like mobile pay in a gated scenario, or the use of QR codes and reservations that would VIN gates, these things were all starting to really happen in the past couple of years in a bigger way. And the idea of being able to accept Google Pay, Apple Pay. To the flip of that, as we look at expenses, we all have been thinking about the costs of credit card transactions, right? So if you move into offering so many different varieties like Apple Pay, Google Pay, you're going to be paying more on your credit card transactions. So things like that are always sort of in the back of our mind, at least when we make decisions about how we move forward. But the whole scenario of COVID, the whole idea of touchless, frictionless just ramped up. And so while we had a budget figure that we knew we could spend, and I'll go on and tell you just so you can kind of see it in our small world what our scope was. We thought we could probably replace parks in 3 garages for around $750,000. So that was kind of our budget. And we can break it down by lane, but this overview really is about how we started to think about, well, maybe let's rewrite. We were close on our RFP, but let's rewrite and put some more stuff in there about touchless and frictionless. Let's see if we can find something that allows someone to interact with our gated facilities without touching our equipment at all if they want to. And so we knew that might cost more. We knew that by making an opportunity for someone to use Google Pay and Apple Pay was going to increase our transaction fees. So these were decisions at the same time. We're all seeing all the businesses is in demands way down. So you're gauging this. Do we need to spend all this money now? Should we wait? And then you start thinking about, well, before COVID, during the day, we were full. At night, we had spaces. Nights and weekends, we had spaces to sell. But during the day, we're full. What if we're not full after COVID? What if demand is just down in general? Now we're going to be wanting to market our spaces to customers. So why don't we be the coolest garages in town? Why don't we be the garages that you can feel safe coming to? You don't have to touch our equipment if you don't want to. And so we worked with putting that RFP out, making a selection, and coming up with a system that is just now this week going to be completed, where you can completely come and go in our garages without touching our equipment in a variety of ways. Also with LPR for the monthly parkers as well. So much more frictionless, much more free flow, lots of new technology at a time when our demand and our revenue is really down, but we're banking on the future. We're banking on this being a marketable, safe, and easy way to park in downtown Lexington. Casey, that's kind of an overview. Does that get us started? Is that what you're hoping?
That's a great start, Gary. Thank you so much. So it sounds like, if summing it up, that you recognize this touchless, the desire for more sort of safety as far as payment options go. But it's couched in the customer experience, right? And less friction and, a more pleasant experience all the way around. And that feels like the thing that you'll be able to advance in the future. I know, thanks, Gary. I really appreciate that. Josh Cantor, George Mason University, my friend, also, had something to share about mobile payment options. So Josh, anything else to add on your experience, similar or different than what Gary shared?
Sure, and thank you for having me, and thank you to so many of you on here that I've learned from over the years and continue to learn from. For us, we had an RFP underway for replacing some aging pay stations, and and we've had mobile payments for several years, but with going through the RFP and going through what's happened this year, we were actually able to reduce the amount of pay stations that we needed and rely more on mobile payments. So I think, in a way, mobile payments went from a nice thing to have to almost an essential thing to have, given, people's concerns and thoughts about touching equipment. So, for us, there were some immediate cost savings in being able to know that, there's still a place where we need pay stations, but that we're able to expand our mobile payment offerings like so many of you all. And, I think our customers were much more willing to adopt that technology. We always talk about, it's great to throw things out there, but if your customer base isn't ready for it, it's you're over investing perhaps. So, I think with everything going on in society, people adopted it. I mean, here in the DC area, we already have a pretty high adoption rate for mobile payments. So it certainly has taken off where one of our campuses, we don't even have pay stations and rely completely on mobile payments. So, definitely some cost savings up front.
Well, and thank you for that, Josh. I really appreciate it. And oftentimes, the really smart people, can see around that corner, right? And in that our customers aren't articulating yet what they need. We're anticipating what they need. So to think, that we're going to go back and it's impossible, right? Once we sort of introduce this great new way and touchless or mobile or, fill in the blank, hard to imagine, that we'll be talking about in 2021, a touchy environment. I just made that up, but you know what I'm saying? Like extra touch. I don't even know what it is, but there's no turning back on it, right? And so if we can recognize that, whether it was through fear or concern that our customers got there, our job is to sort of, make sure we keep pointing in that direction because now they know what they want and can articulate it. Thanks for that. I do appreciate it. One of the things that's really stood out to me and all the, IPMI webinars and state and regional interactions and all of that is, what has happened with our teams and our, we could talk a lot about technologies and, all the advancements and building garages and you name it, but it still is a person oriented. It's still our people, our teams that make this stuff work no matter what. So I want to call on two of my favorite people in the industry and to talk about how teams work. So Maria Ershad with the City of Houston is a close friend. And this is an interesting one because Maria was the person whose opinion had to change. So with that, and she was kind enough to share that with me, and I just punked her out. So with that, Maria, why don't you share with us, changes that happened for your organization with respect to telecommuting?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Casey, and thanks for moderating this shop talk. I think it's a great. Although we are tired of talking about COVID, there's always something good that comes out of these conversations. So happy to participate and be a part of it. So as soon as we started seeing the restrictions come about here, what Houston did that was a little different from what other cities did, just simply because of the way the government works around here. We didn't have the ability to tell our staff to stay home. So everyone had to come in and they had to keep working, or they had to, if they wanted to stay home, they had to, figure out how that was going to take place. Like for parking compliance officers, obviously they cannot telecommute. And even in our administration, telecommuting was referred to as televacationing, when it was something that we have staff here that have been talking about it for many years. Can we work from home? Can we do this? And it was something that I was just, no, we have to be in the office. We have customers. We have to be here. We have to be able to walk to your office and talk and, do things. And it was just, once the pandemic hit and we had to now figure out how we were going to socially distance in the office, telecommuting was, a necessity. Now, it was not something that we could say, not comfortable with that. We're a government. We have layer upon layer of supervisors, and that's how it works in government. So the idea of now having the staff that could start telecommuting was, a little bit, nerve-wracking, to say the least, I think, for a lot of us in government, and even, like I said, the administration, who referred to it as televacationing. But since that time, we've implemented tools like Microsoft Teams. So we have daily, contacts with our teams, which we may not have done before, even though if we were working in the same office. And for our staff that could work from home, we've got quite a few, customer service representatives and administrative staff who work from home. And, productivity has not been negatively impacted. For the other citywide, talking about post-pandemic, one of the things that we're saving on right now is the city will offer its employees, either a bus pass or a parking permit. So, if we telecommute, we're saving money on parking, and that kind of, in the long run, for a city, that would make sense for us, especially with our budget being so negatively impacted from the events of this year. So it's strange as a parking official to say, well, we could save money by having more telecommuters because we don't have to pay for parking or transportation for them now. So that kind of is a little bit of a gut-wrenching thing, but we've made that jump, and it was literally overnight, where whoever needs to work from home, who we can get to work from home, because not everyone can work from home. Like I said before, compliance officers, we can't tell them, okay, go in your neighborhood and just write parking tickets, enforce parking over here, or meter mechanics, technicians, go fix it's just impossible to have them work from home. But for the staff that could work from home, it was a scary leap, but it was something, it was like ripping a Band-Aid off for government, I think, for here in Houston. And it's been pretty, I would say, successful for a majority of the departments that I speak to about it. And then if you look at the cost savings, I think it is something that while right now it is just considered temporary, I anticipate that there's going to be some movement to implementing it permanently, because of course the office space is the other thing that you think about, is how much office space can I save, and how much can I save on energy bills annually. I think that is going to be the next step for a city government like ours. How can we implement this and recognize those cost savings? So.
Got it. Well, thank you, Maria. So I'm going to put you on the spot here in just a second, but it sounds like, summing this up, it's sort of the crisis has created the reason for you to confront some preconceived notions about a particular approach, and now that we have some new tools, you're actually able to do so without impacting your level of service. So let me put you on the spot and ask this question. Looking forward to 2022, let's pretend. What would be your best guess on percentage of your workforce that is able to telecommute, that will telecommute then? So taking out, field staff and, so just in a ballpark figure, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think in our office it's probably about 20%, because a majority of our staff they cannot telecommute. It's just impossible. And then there are managers who are overseeing, the folks who cannot telecommute. And for me, it doesn't seem fair that I would telecommute 5 days a week when I've got staff who have to come in every day. To me, that seems problematic. But I'd say 15 to 20% for our office.
Okay. That feels like a good number. And of course, the other consideration is like, even if some people are able to telecommute, they may not choose to. That may not be their best environment. So I think we're going to have to, in some ways, treat people as individuals and then sort of look at the impact on group dynamics. And that segues really well into my next guest, which would be Carmen Donnell from Pay by Phone. Carmen, and I keep trying to get hired by Carmen just because I think the world of her. I'm not skilled enough to do that, but team building and personal engagement, Carmen, and let's talk about that for a moment, because I know that really matters to all of you and all of us too. But you really have taken some time to think about that and work on that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Casey, for inviting me to speak, and to IPMI for this format. Quite the opposite to Maria, I work in an environment that is inherently remote. So coming to Pay by Phone a couple of years ago, I had, this is very cliche, but also shared with my colleague Adam and my leader Romy, this work hard, play hard approach to how to build the team and how to construct our work life. And that was very easy to do externally. So obviously we're at conferences, we're at client engagements, prospects, events, and meals. So there's that opportunity to play hard and of course work hard at the same time. But leading a remote team, it's very challenging because the opportunities to come together and create that sort of play and fun approach is quite challenging. So some examples of what we did prior to COVID, pre-COVID, when we put the team together early 2019, we all came together in person in Vancouver, and we had a lot of work component, lots of meetings, long hours, trainings, and that type of thing. But we made sure to inject some fun. So we did games like Two Truths and a Lie. We had one evening where we had about 3 hours worth of heavy competition with the classic minute to win it type style. I do have photographic evidence of Romy wearing a costume involving a feather boa, high heels, doing an obstacle course around our office. And we did a cooking class with one of the local restaurants. And so we tried to step out of the work environment and create that team bonding in the building. But that was only when we could come together in person, which of course is very limited. So we were doing weekly meetings virtually, no camera on, because pre-COVID, who turned their cameras on? And we really only got about 50 to 60% attendance because most of the team was on the road in meetings or conferences. So that was really challenging to get that cohesive feel as well. Romy came to town every month, and we would do what we call the monthly stand-up. And we would bring breakfast items in, and we would go around the room and share, work wins. And then we would have some time for personal engagement to finish off the food after. So those are the types of things that we were doing before, but it was challenging because we are living in this remote work environment inherently due to, being a technology vendor. So one of the impactful moments for me pre-COVID was attending the IPMI leadership last year in the fall. And Andy from LAS did a discussion on sort of total life balance. And one of the videos that she showed was called Looking Up. And what that told me was that sort of face-to-face, eye-to-eye visual contact is really important in building teams. So I started turning cameras on in November, December of last year with my team one-on-ones. And that made a big difference. But what has really made a big difference is COVID. So where it's been challenging for some teams that are used to being together, it's actually accelerated our opportunity for bonding. So our attendance went to 90% plus for all of our team meetings. Cameras went on immediately, and we were able to add a really fun component on a more regular cadence. So we did themes, crazy hat, beach day. If we were experiencing a holiday like St. Patrick's Day, we had to come in that type of a costume. I put on a couple of virtual games, so scavenger hunts and trivia, sometimes prizes, sometimes just the prize of winning. And I've changed my weekly team meeting to being 100%, business goals, and let's talk about the corporate initiatives and what worked and what didn't, to a 50-50 blend of, okay, let's get the work out of the way. And then each member of my team on a different week comes with 20 to 30 minutes of fun content. So for example, one of my team members came a few weeks ago and he said, okay, I've got a series of questions. If you were stranded on a desert island, what would you do if? What would you bring if? This past week, we all had to share a funny moment in our past that nobody knew. And if somebody knew it, we had to like buzz the horn and you had to come up with a new story. We've learned a ton about each other. We've created a lot of trust and loyalty within our team, and we've had a lot of fun doing it. So adding that personal play element has, I think, just launched our team cohesiveness in a way that wouldn't have been possible pre-COVID. And so for those of you that are not used to remote teams, adding some of these elements in could potentially help you. For those of you that are interested in reading studies, Google did a 5-year project, a research project. It's called Project Aristotle. You can just Google it. And it talks about the 5 elements of building a good team and how it's not about having all of the best skill sets, but it's how to build that cohesiveness and that trust and that empathy and loyalty. So for those of you interested, I definitely suggest researching that. Post-COVID, the challenge is now going to be to maintain this momentum, because hopefully one day we'll be able to travel again and go in-person meetings and conferences. And of course, relationships take work, they take nurturing. So I can't just rest on our laurels and assume that the momentum that we've created now is going to continue. So that will be the challenge, is finding the quality. We're not going to have the same quantity moving forward, but keeping that quality and that cohesive, work hard, play hard, team bonding.
Carmen, thank you so much. A couple of things. I'm glad the game wasn't who you wouldn't take to the island with you, because I would fear that it would be me.
No.
I have a feeling that the Pay by Phone HR website is getting just bombarded now. Everyone wants to come and work with you. So kudos
Thank
to you.
you.
There.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm thinking probably, one challenge for you is, you move into the future and keeping that momentum. I think people will miss, maybe not the exact things that you did, but the spirit of what you're accomplishing now, right? I was on a team with Romy also, right? And that is some of the fondest work experience that I've had, that team. So I totally get it, right? And I would imagine, you have created some really important pressure for yourself as a leader in, figuring out how to adopt or adapt what you're doing now more in a remote way, but in the future, because your teams are going to miss what you've been able to create with them during this time of crisis. And I guess before we move on, one last plea, Carmen. I would love to see the detail in what you've done in a webinar, and that really demands a whole hour or maybe even more. We have so much to learn from you and your team. Tremendous example, and I hope you have a chance to do that, because we could all really improve if we got all the details in that approach that you've taken. Yeah, so thanks. So those are the two, and I should have done this with technology investments. I apologize, but anybody want to weigh in right now on how teams work and and what Maria and Carmen have shared so far before we move on to the next topic? Justin, I'll beg you to take a look at the poll or take a look at the chat box while we're moving along here. Anything come up? Anybody want to share?
Nothing's come up. There's a lot of conversation on who would get Casey on their island.
Those poor souls. Okay, fantastic. So we're going to shift gears a little bit here. We've talked about technology and we've touched on teams and how we get work done, both from the public sector and the private sector. Want to focus in on a bit of parking policy, some of those changes. And Vanessa Soulsby is one of my favorite people in the town of Estes Park. And Vanessa, I think, could spend a whole day on talking about her experience. There were fires on top of COVID, and just amazing stuff that she's had to do. But one of the things she's tried to pull off recently is introducing paid parking. And gosh, you can't think of a more difficult and challenging time to do something as significant as that than now. So let me turn it over to Vanessa, who could talk about paid parking and how that's gone for her and what lessons she's learned that can help her in the future.
Thank you so much, Casey. And it's really good to see everyone. Happy holidays. And yeah, 2020 has been a total doozy, as we've heard from other speakers. In addition to COVID, the entire town of Estes Park was evacuated in October due to being in the middle of the two largest wildfires in Colorado history. So when we thought we were making a recovery this summer due to increased visitation, and actually, we ended up beating the sales tax figures from 2019 this year as we headed into the fall. Then we had the second whammy of the wildfire evacuation. So it has been an interesting year. But before all of this hit, we had some big changes on both the parking and the transit side. As Casey mentioned, I have spent the last couple of years in this position building the case for implementing seasonal paid parking. And we had finally gotten that approved by the town board in November of 2019. So we were full speed ahead on implementation. That ground to a halt, as well as our plans to revitalize and revamp our seasonal transit service. So we had huge plans on both sides of the operation. But I will tell you, and part of this is, now that I feel like we're kind of getting to the other side of it was, hindsight's 2020, but part of it was planning as well. We were able to really dig in this year and take advantage of the fact that at no other time do you have the opportunity to hit pause on 5 million tourists descending on your town. And we really jumped on the opportunity to do some planning and to really kind of rethink all of these things we had in the works for 2020, and also to pilot some of the initiatives that we had planned, most notably moving all of our permits online, moving to a virtual system. We got to do that without also layering implementation of paid parking on top. And we introduced a whole new suite of permit offerings. And again, got to pilot those, get everyone used to the virtual system that we'll be using going forward, and also leverage some of our existing LPR and video counting technologies to collect data on where our employees were going, where our commercial parkers were going. And again, we got to do that in a relatively calm year without the flood of tourists that we normally see. We were also able to make some changes on the technologies that we had planned to implement this year. We are going to move forward with pay stations, and now we're going to be able to move more to an infrastructure light approach with the touchless features. We were already planning a heavy mobile payment push, but we are doubling down on that and really taking a close look at where do we actually need infrastructure in the field versus where can we just start right out of the gate with the expectation that we're going to have a heavy mobile payment option combined with additional staff resources, just due to the demographics of our community with a lot of visitors and folks coming in and out of town that may not know the system. So we were able to make some changes on that front as well. And then interestingly enough, I had to come back to the community and the town board again just this fall and resell paid parking. So I got to do it again, which was a little Groundhog Day, but I was also able to broaden the way that I am talking about what we are trying to do with paid parking implementation. Not only that it's a good management strategy and that it's based on data that we've collected over the past number of years, but also that it's the right financial move for our town at this particular stage, not knowing what's coming ahead, knowing that nearly 70% of our town's budget is funded through sales tax, which took it took a moderate hit this year. So I was able to really wrap more pieces into the narrative about why we needed to continue to push forward with implementing paid parking in 2021. And then finally, we were able to pick up some of the planning things that were bubbling in the background. We were able to have a real focus on increasing electric vehicle infrastructure and usage, do some planning, not only within the town's fleet, but also to increase tourism. We just turned on our first DC fast charging stations and really helped connect Estes Park to the network for an increasing EV atmosphere here in Colorado. So that was really exciting. And then also we had the time to write a grant to get our first ever bus facility. So some of you may have heard we've got some, the first electric trolley in the state of Colorado. We implemented that vehicle this year. We're getting a second one next year. And now we have some place to put them, which is really great because the wind up here is something else. And then finally, this year also gave me the opportunity to step back to a time when I worked in a disaster recovery role for another organization and step into a leadership role here in the town as the town's recovery manager. And that allowed me to form some pretty extraordinary relationships with the business community in and outside of downtown that I would not have had a chance to form had this disaster not come. And I can tell you that relationship and that role, being able to reach out and talk to and help businesses in this really difficult time, has built a trust that I know will serve me and the community well as we move into 2021. And I'm back in front of them again, asking them to trust me that paid parking will actually help and not hurt their businesses. So it's been, again, hindsight's 2020. I guess that should be a funny phrase somewhere, but it's, I'm looking back, I'm seeing all of these wonderful things that happen, but it's taken getting through the weeds to have that perspective. So I appreciate the opportunity to share, Casey. Thank you so much.
Vanessa, you're an amazing person. And I kept hearing you say over and over again, well, and we had time to do this and we had time to do that. And that's crazy because I know you took on a handful of other roles in addition to, parking and transit in the town of Estes Park. So you've figured out time travel or something. So it's quite an amazing thing. I don't know how you juggle it all, but one question I want to focus in on is, can you summarize, maybe it's council or the administrators that you report to, have their expectations of you and your program changed? And if you could, and I know I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but if you could, think about pretty quickly, like what if you had three things to say before COVID and your fires, everything that's happened, and now what are they? Or maybe they haven't changed at all, so it'd be curious to know the sort of framework for decision making there in Estes Park. Has there been any evolution? Have you seen any change in how you're getting cues from your leadership?
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good question, Casey. And interestingly enough, not only our mayor, but also nearly the majority of our town board turned over between last fall and this fall. So I actually had to talk to paid parking. It was actually two different boards. There were some of the same folks at that table. But what I will tell you that I've seen in terms of transition with the relationships with staff and our town leadership and our town administrator also turned over this year. So we had a really new group of leaders step to the table. And I think when I was hired, there was this kind of sense that parking and transit were just kind of this thing off by themselves that really didn't impact the town as a whole or our economic vitality. And I can tell you that over the past couple of years, and especially this last year, that has shifted. And parking and transit has turned into more of a mobility, economic vitality sort of feel and approach. And I think that, that's a conversation that staff have been transitioning with our leadership at the town. We've been trying to share this message, and I think COVID helped kind of bring it home, why these things are so integral to the vitality and the resiliency of our community. So I feel personally like I was on this little kind of satellite island, parking and transit. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was like, the list of essential employees came out, and I think everyone was essential except for like me. It was like all 100 employees essential. Parking and transit, that's not essential to anything. But then this year, I think our leadership started to see how those pieces all fit together. And it's really changed the narrative and the language here about how the community thinks about the role that we play in getting people to the economic engines of the community, to the business districts, and also how innovation in parking and transit can be a selling point and bring tourists to town, with the example of our electric trolley and the charging station infrastructure. It's been pretty incredible to see that start to change. And I'm sure that resonates with a lot of folks around this virtual table who've been out on that island and are like getting closer to having a seat at the table.
Yeah, well, gosh, what's amazing is, I mean, most of us for a long time have been talking about, and maybe in more abstract ways, that connection between economic and community vitality and what we all do, right? Access and mobility. But it has taken this crisis for that to really come home to the people, that we needed most in our camp, right? The decision makers. So Vanessa, you're amazing. Future mayor of the town of Estes Park, I have no doubt. Much appreciated. We're gonna take one more speaker on this topic of parking policy, and then I want to circle back. Catherine, we're going to give you a chance to weigh in. You had a really good question that goes back to how teams work together, and so I don't want to miss that. So Catherine, if you could be ready. But for now, I'd like to introduce Matt Penny from Baylor University, close friend, an amazing human being. Zonal parking. So, I think on top of, sort of next to implementing paid parking in your city, moving from a hunting license, to something else on a university campus might be one of the hardest things to accomplish, next to, changing, when professors can teach, something along those lines. But Matt Penny, I hope, is on the call. Matt Penny is not on the call. So off doing wonderful and great things at Baylor University, I'm sure. But so I guess with that, what we'll do is we'll circle back to Catherine and take her question and comment about teams and how we work. And she's raised some important questions about fairness and equity and telecommuting, et cetera. So Catherine, thanks for your question, and I'll give you the floor.
Oh, I was just wondering, so in my previous life, right now I'm working as a consultant for the Norwalk Transit District, but not too long ago I was Director of Transportation, Mobility and Parking for the City of Norwalk, and before that, the Director of the Norwalk Parking Authority. So when Gary was talking about how the Parking Authority has flexibility, I'm well aware of that, and it's a really good thing, and I think most municipalities should definitely try to do that. So during when the pandemic hit, I was director of TMP, and I have both the planning and operation teams that reported to me under the umbrella of economic development. So just on a side note, when Vanessa was talking about economic development, that's exactly how we were looking at transportation, mobility, and parking. Under the umbrella of economic development. So when this hit, we all went pretty much, the mayor called for basically almost a full-blown lockdown, but still we were considered an essential service. We still had signals, we still had the parking team. So it was a matter of how do we deal with that? So on May 1st, I actually brought everybody back, because the office team was so small. And I said to the field team, I said, you guys, you have signals to deal with. We have all these projects that we have to get out. We might as well take advantage of the opportunity. Things are calm now. There's not a lot of people on the road. We can create all these plans and we can get them ready for implementation. And so that's what I did. Just real quick on my hat now, and the transit district, this is public transit. I mean, they service, they have a fixed route, a paratransit route, and then they have a microtransit route. And so the microtransit, that was shut down. Paratransit and fixed route, that you had to continue because people had to get to the hospitals. You have essential workers, first responders that have to get around. So public transit, they did not shut down at all. They were here the whole time. So I just was wondering how it's really difficult, because you have people that definitely have to come to work. But then you have some people just on a safe side in the office that you can work from home. I was able to work from home, but I felt like Maria, I'm like, well, I have all these other people working for me. It doesn't set a really good leadership example. So I came into the office. So anyway, that was my experience. I was just wondering how everybody else, and like you said, Casey, it was really an individual thought process. It's hard to globalize that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, and I think I was imagining, as you were sort of, spinning up your teams and like, hey, we've got things to do. I could imagine how grateful they were, right? I mean, honestly, I have talked to lots of friends and colleagues who have, field teams and all that. And they, there's a bit of disconnection that took place, right? And people who are otherwise, gosh, this is what I do. That I work and I'm a part of a team, and then that ceased to exist for a while. I would imagine that their mental, most of the people that were working for you were like, just, man, this is awesome. This is a breath of fresh air. We've got things to do. We can keep moving forward, and so I commend you for like saying, let's get at it.
But that's exactly what happened. May 1st, when we all came back, and again, half of them, most of them were in the field, and then very small office staff. So we were safe, and we were in our own suite. They were happy because, yeah, working from home is really convenient, but you do feel isolated. You really do. You want to have those spontaneous ideas and conversations, and it's hard to do that when you're working from home.
Well, and in the thing that really stands out in what you said is the obligation that we have to our teams, if we're in a leadership position, to be present as we can be. Probably a fatal mistake, I guess, as a leader to seem disengaged or seem, you all are sacrificing and you're out there and I'm, I'll be nice and cozy at home, whether that's during the pandemic or a fire in Colorado or snowstorms in Pennsylvania, all of that. So I think, I guess I hope that doesn't sound all that preachy, but I think leaders in particular have to be incredibly thoughtful about, their visibility and, what they're asking their teams to do in a small crisis, in a big crisis, and day to day, quite frankly, for that matter. So I really
you have to get your hands dirty.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, thank you for weighing in there. These were. I want to just check to see if one more person was able to come. The snowstorms in the Northeast have impacted the folks that are able to be on this call today, and I don't want to miss anybody that said that they would. I expect Texas is getting a bunch of snow right now, which is why Matt was unable to attend. But anything else for the good of the order? We've got just a few more minutes here. I've really, really appreciated everyone's time that weighed in today, that took a few minutes to think about their 2020 and what it can mean for a more prosperous and successful 2021 and beyond. So thank you to my friends who rose to the occasion once again. You're all amazing people. And I do applaud all of you, every one of you in this industry for meeting the challenge of this year. It makes me hopeful that there isn't anything that can't be accomplished, right? As hard as it has been. And, we're not out of the weeds yet either, right? Some of us are, imagining kind of a slow going, even through most of 2021. But that doesn't mean that we can't be productive. That certainly doesn't mean that we can't make progress. You've heard from industry leaders here today that in spite of that, and maybe because of these crises, have been able to move forward and give their teams, their communities hope and meaningful work to do and forge ahead. And in that, they have gained more respect and trust of their elected officials and their teams and all the way around. So it's just remarkable to hear these stories. So I really thank you all for that. So again, thanks for IPMI giving me the opportunity to moderate this session and close the book on 2021. I wish you all a happy, safe holiday and what 2021 brings.
Thank you, Casey. Before we wrap up today, Kathleen Federici, the Director of Professional Development, would like to say a few words. Kathleen?
Thanks, Justin. And thank you, Casey, for moderating the shop talk. And thank you to everyone who contributed today, either verbally or in chat, or everyone who's just here. Thank you so much. As we reflect back on 2020, we'll remember the pandemic and its impact, of course, but we'll also remember how well our IPMI community has come together. Throughout this year, we've had so many people share their insights like we did today, lend a hand or stay connected with us. This is our last session for 2020, and we want to let you know that we are going to be here for you in 2021, and we have a lot of things planned. But for now, my closing remarks, stay well, be kind to one another, take care of yourself and each other. And from all of us here at IPMI, we wish you a happy, healthy holiday season. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Well,
Thank you again for attending today's Shop Talk. Today's Shop Talk is copyrighted in 2020 by the International Parking Mobility Institute with all rights reserved.